spoiled the dramatic effect of the first slide. All right. So it's my pleasure to introduce our second keynote speaker, Dr. Juan Gilbert. He has just recently moved to the University of Florida. He is taking the Andrew Banks Chair at the University of Florida, and he's leading the Human-Centered Computing Lab there. His research area is in spoken language systems and advanced learning. He's published over 140 articles. He's given over 200 presentations, so he's given at least 201 presentations after today. He has numerous awards. Perhaps the most significant is the 2012 Presidential Award for Excellence in Science, Math, and Engineering Mentoring, which he received from President Obama. And he's the, yes. He happens to be the only person I know who's been honored in a mural, which to me is kind of unique. So without further ado, I will give you the keynote speaker, Dr. Juan Gilbert. He will be talking on societal impacts through research and diversity, who we are and what we do.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so thanks for having me. And my topic deals with who we are and what we do, societal impacts. And this comes from a place that's very fascinating for me as a scientist. The research that I've done over the years, and I'll give you a little background. When I was in graduate school, I was the only African American in my program. And for, 13 years, I thought I was the only African American pursuing a Ph.D. in computer science until I met Dr. Lawrence. She saved me. I always say that. But before then, because I was so isolated, I hung out with a group of social scientists. And they were doing research on STEM. And it was fascinating to see research about women and minorities going into areas which they define as helping professions, areas which had a clear way to contribute to the human condition or helping the human condition in some way. And that research resulted in findings that said that people would go away from STEM because they thought we worked with artifacts and phenomena and not people. And so they thought that STEM had minimal societal impacts in helping others. And so that motivated the research that I do, that motivated this talk and all the things that we've done for the last 15 years. So I always begin with, who we are. And to say that there's this argument that if you have diversity, somehow you sacrifice quality, the two don't go hand in hand. But I actually have research that shows that that's just false. It's inaccurate. And so I start off with who we are. So as you know, I'm moving to the University of Florida, but I had moved to Clemson 5 years ago. I was there 5 years. And these were some of my faculty that I hired, actually, at Clemson. We had 6 African-American tenure-track faculty at a Ph.D. granting institution. That was the first time in history this has ever been done. It was 10% of the nation's Black or African-American computer science faculty in one place. In one place. There's only 60. So it was 6 of us in one place. And when I was at Auburn, there were 3 of us, Jerry Dozier, Cheryl Seals, and myself. And today, there's a couple places that have 2, but I can't think of a place that has 3. I don't know of a place that has 3. So this was a big deal for 6 of us to be there. On the left is Kyla McMullen, and then Christina. I'll talk about them, myself, Damon. Shani Daly got her Ph.D. at MIT in the Media Lab, and Sekou Remy got his Ph.D. at Georgia Tech. So while we were there, we also recruited a gang of African-American Ph.D. students. So much so we had more than 11% of the nation's Black or computer science Ph.D. students in one place. We had over 25 at one time in one place. Now to put that in perspective, to my knowledge, currently no place has more than 6, and most places have 1, if any. So this was a cultural shift at the institution. It was very different. and I have people who actually interview them and are studying them because their experience in this environment is very different from other students in other environments. So we were able to accomplish that, and now we moved to Florida. So look who's going to Florida. So on the left, Dr. Corey Toller Franklin. She's the first African-American to get a Ph.D. at Princeton University in computer science. And she's a postdoc now, presidential postdoc at UC Santa Barbara. She's moving this fall. Damon got his Ph.D. at Notre Dame. Kyla, first African-American woman to get a Ph.D. in computer science at Michigan. Christina, Georgia Tech, and then myself. So now there's 5 of us moving to Florida. And in this transition, so there were 4 from my team to move, then Corey. And then 2 of my postdocs are coming. And then we have 18 students coming. And of those 18, at least 12 of them are, 14 of them are from an underrepresented group. So we're doing the same thing now in a different place. So we're able to do these things, but this was unprecedented in many ways from a diversity perspective. No one had more African-American computer science PhD students or computer science tenure track faculty. And again, it was a cultural shift. And we could talk offline about what those experiences were like, not only for me, but for the students and the community that was founded. So now I want to tell you about some of the things we do. So people will look at our diversity and say, okay, people recruit you because you bring this diversity, and that's just not true. When we moved to Clemson, and the same with Florida, the diversity was a bonus. It was a +1. When we moved to Clemson, we doubled their research expenditures in the School of Computing in less than 2 years. And then we became the most productive unit on campus. So from that perspective, that's the thing people don't see. They see our diversity first, but they're not aware of the research productivity that we brought at the same time. And the same thing with Florida. So let me talk a little bit about that research and put it in the context of those helping professions, giving back, and those kind of things. So we deal with this thing called human-centered computing. It deals with understanding design and implementation, evaluation of computational technologies as it relates to a human condition and how these technologies affect society. So that's what we do, and I'll show you examples of that. We work in all these different areas. We study IT workforce development, speech, natural interactive systems, human-robot interaction, IT policy. We do brain-computer interfaces. We have some exciting work in there. We do gaming, and you'll see some examples of some of these things. So I start with a project dealing with voting, making voting more accessible for everyone. So you all remember in 2000, just coincidentally in Florida, we had that issue with the butterfly ballot. So this was fascinating because in 2000 that issue occurred and everyone knew about it, and it wasn't until 2003 that my team actually got involved. And how did we get involved? We were in Atlanta at the Tapia conference, the ACM Richard Tapia conference. And there was a speaker there, I won't say the speaker's name, but there was a speaker talking about voting. And the speaker said, you can't use computers in voting, it won't happen, there's no solution. It was very negative. And my students, I was watching them and their demeanor changed. They were really like, that's just bad. So I said, why don't we do something about it? So we started a project because someone said it couldn't be done. That's what motivated them. We went back to the lab and we created, well, everybody knows this was the problem. The voter's intent wasn't accurately captured. We had issues, and the United States created the Help America Vote Act, which gave an influx of money to states. And then they went out and bought equipment, direct recording equipment, or DREs, touchscreen machines, which people hacked and showed problems with because it didn't produce a paper ballot and all that. So then they moved to optical scans. They said everybody could do that when we were in school. You just fill in the oval and they scan it. Well, those didn't work either. In the 2008 United States Senate race in Minnesota with Al Franken and Norm Coleman, That was a catastrophic failure of the scan because people didn't fill in the ovals properly and they wrote other things. And so the margin of victory was smaller than the number of ballots thrown out because of those mistakes. So we went to the lab, we got in this, and we created this technology called Prime 3, Premier Third Generation Voting System. First generation is paper, second generation are these touchscreen DREs. Third generation is Prime 3. And we created the first version in 2003. So that's over 10 years ago. So the way it works, it allows people to vote by touch and or voice. So you can touch the screen, you have a headset and a microphone, and you can speak to it. Well, when we created this, all these people were able to privately and independently vote. If you can't see, if you can't hear, if you can't read even, you could privately and independently vote. And we had stumbled onto something, we didn't know it, but we had created the world's most accessible voting technology, period. So we created this technology, we went on the road showing it to people, we wrote proposals to NSF. That was such a fascinating experience. It was kind of painful at the time, but we learned a lot. I submitted a proposal to NSF one year, and they said, well, this sounds good, but you don't talk about security enough. I submitted again the next year. Well, you talk about security, but it has to be accessible and usable. So I couldn't win, and then, and I'll tell you what happened after that. I'll show you what happened, but that was we went through that experiment for 3 years, and I'll tell you what happened. So we created this technology. We did studies. We were at Auburn. We did a study with 200 participants, students on campus. We went to the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, a group of seniors, did studies with them. We did an audit or counting study with Rice University. We went to the Alabama Institute for the Deaf and Blind, and that was a great experience. The first time we went, we got this technology, real excited, we're gonna go test. We had blind people, real blind people use it. The students are all excited, and they get there and they couldn't use it, it didn't work. And so the students were discouraged. They said, why didn't it work? They didn't like it. So we went back to the lab, and what they were doing, my students, they were testing it with the headset on, the mic, and watching. So I took the laptop, turned it around where they couldn't see it, and they said, I can't follow it. So we redesigned it, we went back, and it worked. So they had to put themselves in the shoes of a blind person where they couldn't see it. So we went there, we tested, we did a vote flipping study. That was exciting. This was a result of the presidential race. It was in West Virginia. There were accusations that there was vote flipping, meaning people were trying to vote for Barack Obama and it flipped to John McCain. And in West Virginia, the rules are the incumbent party gets the first slot. So John McCain, then Barack Obama. And it was a touch screen with buttons. But the way they designed it was that the name of the candidate was at the top of that button. So what was happening were people who were trying to touch Barack Obama's name and inadvertently touching the bottom of John McCain's button. So it wasn't vote flipping, it was that they were touching the bottom of the button and they didn't know it. And so we actually did a YouTube video, showed this was happening, did a study, and in our study we saw that about 6% of the population, if given a button like that, will touch a name. So that's interesting probably for this group that, we touch buttons all the time, but there are still enough people who don't interact with computers enough that they don't understand the button, but they see the name, so they touch names. And if you're touching a name in that environment, you are vulnerable to vote flipping or perception of vote flipping. So we actually did elections with our technology. The National Society of Black Engineers since 2008 has used Prime 3. That's the world's largest student-run organization. We got a lot of data out of that. National Council of Independent Living used our technology twice in DC for their national election. We did a mock election at Auburn. And then in 2012, for the presidential primary, the state of Oregon used Prime 3. So some of you may be familiar with the fact that Oregon's a mail-in state. So you say, well, how did they use it? Well, they took our software on tablets and went to independent living centers and rehab centers and let people vote. And they printed the ballot and mailed it in. And they had more people participate in that primary than they had in the actual election from those places. So that was an exciting experience, and we were there to help with that. We also did Self-Advocates Becoming Empowered. This was an extremely important election for us. This is an organization of people that have cognitive disabilities. So going into this election, we knew there would be individuals who were going to use our technology who were all over the reading literacy scale. But we had no idea where they were and who they were. We had 250 people vote. For this election, what we did, we put pictures on the ballot. And we ran the election, and we never had any trouble with someone voting. So we said, maybe the pictures, because we couldn't tell if they could read or not. But we did hear things like, yeah, that's him or her, and they point to pictures instead of text. So we thought they were voting from the pictures. So to confirm our perception, we went to Clemson Elementary School, where we knew there were people who could not read, and we had them do a mock presidential election. This was the Thursday before the actual presidential election on Tuesday. The kids voted. They were able to vote, and they used the pictures. They actually voted Barack Obama to win. The parents wanted a recount. On Tuesday, the election came, and President won, and they withdrew their complaint. So the kids had actually accurately picked the president, which was fascinating as well. So if you're in a red state, you understand how that goes. Here's another big one. April 1st, the state of Wisconsin used Prime 3 in 2 counties, very rural counties. This was a different election and important for not only for our work, but for the country. And the reason this was so significant is because earlier this year in January, if you guys recall, after the last presidential election, President Obama said, in those long lines, we're going to fix that. He formed the Presidential Commission on Election Administration. They spent roughly a year or so going around collecting data about elections, what's broken, et cetera. They released their report in January. In that report, they cited that we need to experiment more with what's called COTS, commercial off-the-shelf components, in voting. So election officials had always said, you know, we got to get with a vendor, and it costs a lot. Why can't I go to Best Buy and get me an iPad and use it in an election? I want to buy something off the shelf. Well, here we are. We've been doing off the shelf for over a decade. And they called us up and said, we want to try this out. So we gave them the software, and they ran the election without us. Now, we showed up as tech support, but all we could do was watch. So that was a fascinating election because a lot of lessons were learned from using COTS and that experience. So now we have New Hampshire, we're going to Florida, we have a bunch of other places who want to experiment with our technology. So that made a big impact. Here's another one. Everyone Counts is an internet voting company. They worked with us at Auburn, and they did an election in Pima County, Arizona, using off-the-shelf components that resembles our work. So what we're seeing is a shift towards what we're doing. We're changing the way voting is done in this country. Now, how did we do it? Well, we got funded by NSF, finally. Ephraim Gliner, some of you probably know him, he was sick of me being rejected. Sounds funny, the program officer, he was sick of it. He said, you know what? This was back in 2006. He said, I'm gonna give you a sugar. That's what they were called. Now they're called EAGRs, right? A small grant for exploratory research, and now EAGR is early grant something, I forget. But anyway, he gave me that $93,000. That turned out to be a very, very wise investment, not only for us, but for NSF. Because later, we won a $4.5 million grant from the United States Election Assistance Commission, and we were able to fund all these projects and some more that I'll tell you about. And we actually had a day on Capitol Hill, demo day, where we had congressmen, senators come to the event. And at that time, NSF was in transition for the director, and more what's her name? Correct? Core Merritt. Core Merritt came to this event, and we were able to say it was sponsored by NSF, called Ephraim. Now, why is this so significant? Some of you are at NSF, and you know there's this trajectory, this data being collected to say, for this thing with Congress, where you want to show the impact of your funded work. We will have changed the way voting is done in the United States of America. We've already done that. And you will be able at NSF to tie back that sugar award to how you changed the way voting was done in this country. And the Election Assistance Commission is obviously excited about that. So you say, well, what else have we done? You look at President Obama's thing about making voting faster. We created this technology which we call balloting. Imagine before the election, you could go online on the phone or somewhere and you fill out a ballot and you get a QR code. And that QR code represents that ballot. So in that case, what happens if it's a case that Andrea and I are from Atlanta, from the same neighborhood or whatever, we vote in the same place, if we fill out the same ballot, the QR codes are identical. On election day, we show up, we walk up to the machine, we scan it, and it brings up the review screen. So I could change my vote, or I could just review and print it. This changes the paradigm for voting because previously what I had to do is I had to go, read, mark, review, cast. Now I'm reviewing and casting, and maybe marking. So we actually created this, and this QR code is open, meaning anyone can scan it and see what's in it. It's not anything proprietary. You can read it. So what we did a study. We took the 2012 Broward County ballot, and we had 3 conditions. We took the paper ballot, we put a version in Prime 3, and we did the balloting approach, and we timed them. So we took the paper ballot. On average, it took 4.5 minutes to complete that paper ballot. Voting on a touchscreen, 3.8 minutes. If you scan it and review it, less than a minute. So we created this, we're publishing these results, and guess what? ES&S, the nation's largest voting machine manufacturer, comes out with a new voting technology called the Express Vote Universal Voting System. Now in 2003, when we started creating Prime 3, conventional wisdom said you have to have a separate machine for people with disabilities, an accessible voting machine. We said, no, we want one machine that's universal for everyone. They said, you can't do it. Look what happened. Now the industry is doing that. This machine is going through certification right now. And by the way, they implemented our balloting approach. So it has balloting on it. It's going through certification. We actually did the usability study and wrote a report that's part of that certification. So we're actually seeing the way elections are going to be done is shifting based on things, actually sad to say, we did 10 years ago, but we're there. We will actually change the way voting's done in this country. So that's one example of where we took research and we applied it to something with societal impacts and our expertise and usability, people, software, and we created something. The next thing we did is Project Hero. We took on gun violence. We were fed up with the issue of seeing people getting shot in schools, and no one was doing anything. Nothing was being passed. There's no measures in place. And so, again, my students were disappointed. And whenever they're disappointed about something, I say, do something about it. Don't complain and just be unhappy. Do something. Use your expertise. And so what we did, we created Project Hero. So the question is, can we end gun violence in schools? And we're going to try to do that. And I'll let you read this, and then it's going to show a video. That's Brooke. I'll tell you about her in a second. So Project Hero, that's the robot is actually called, it's funny, but we love it, Booby Trap. So Boo is what they call the robot. We posted this video on YouTube, and we have not built this, but people thought we actually built it. So I got calls from different agencies and others asking me, can we pilot this and test it? We did do some collect data, and both sides like this idea, meaning the pro-gun lobby said, you're not taking my gun. This might work. And then those against guns said, you didn't introduce new guns. That might work. But the minute they find out they both like it, it probably go all bad. But we just proposed this idea. We're seeking funding for it and doing things, but it's just to spark the discussion, to say there's got to be other things you can do. There's technology out there, and then lo and behold, there was a shooting a couple of weeks ago, and they thought the shooter was in some room, and they sent in a robot to look. So I don't know where this will go, but this is just an idea, a concept to move the discussion. And again, it made the students feel better. So that was one thing we did. The other thing we did, again, I hung out with those social scientists who were doing research on STEM. And we said, well, look, how can we increase participation? Broaden participation in STEM, computing. And something was happening. I would go visit a school, and kids would come to me and say, are you a preacher? What do you do? I've never had anybody say, you look like a computer science professor or anything like that. In fact, there's a funny story behind it. When I met my wife, I told her what I did, and she didn't believe me. So she went and looked me up and called me a week later. She thought I was lying. So the stereotypes are real, and they hurt, meaning they are part of this reason we don't have very much participation. So one of the things we did was I started to see that when I go places and speak to kids, it changes their perceptions. So it's funny, Andrea's here. I didn't plan this. I didn't know she was going to be here. But she knows it was back in 2006. I came and visited Spelman, and I gave a talk about graduate school, the professoriate, et cetera. And from that talk, her graduates that next year, a large number of them applied to our graduate program. And I said, did the talk tell them something they didn't know? So we took that talk on the road to several HBCUs and other places. And that talk had an impact because it was showing them different perspectives of research. It was showing them who we are, all these kind of things. So we said, well, we have this unique environment, the largest population of African-American computer scientists in the nation, but we can't go everywhere. So what can we do to reach more people? So we created this web series called Lab Days.
Experience a lab you've never seen before.
Oh, come to grad school. This class is so hard.
On Lab Days, you'll see the ins and outs of being an HCC Ph.D. student. The extensive research, the homework, the traveling, the world-changing projects,
Miles David.
and yes, the occasional party.
You think you know computer science, but you have no idea.
Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and visit us at www.labdays.com.
So we put this up back in August. That was when we released the first episode. I think we have 9 episodes now. You can see it on labdays.com. And we put that up to show who we are, what we do, research we're doing, places we travel, and we turn it into an experiment. If kids watch it, will it change their perceptions of scientists? Wow, I didn't know we would have the impact that we've had so far. I gave a talk at a conference in Philadelphia, and afterwards I was speaking to someone, and I saw this young lady run across the room, and she jumped in between us and said, excuse me, are you the guy who did that lab days thing? I said, yeah. She said, oh, thank you. Me and my friends, we watch it all the time at Johns Hopkins in our graduate program. Graduate students watching it. Interesting. So we did some studies, and we have some data now. We were going back to Atlanta, actually. We had an elementary school teacher incorporate lab days into Black History Month curriculum. So we did, after that, we did a webinar Skype session with the kids and answered their questions and everything. And we collected data about that experience. So we'll have a report on that. I haven't seen the results yet. But from what, anecdotally speaking, it is changing their perceptions when they could see, like you saw PJ putting on the brain-computer interface. You saw that drone flying. He was flying that with his thoughts, the brain-computer interface. So they see things like that and say, we can do that? So we're collecting data. We'll see where it goes. And the teacher put it in the curriculum. So our goal would be to have that curriculum. We'll post it somewhere. Maybe other teachers will pick it up, and we'll see where it goes. And ideally, we'd like to do a longitudinal study that follow those kids for the next decade and see where they end up. Will they go to college? And if they do, will they become computer science majors and things like that? So I don't know what's going to happen with it, but we're going to continue to do lab days. We have 9 episodes out, and some of them are very entertaining. We do spotlights of people. We do spotlights of projects. We show all kinds of different aspects of our research. So it's been exciting so far, and it was funny because I thought the students were going to be a little reluctant. Say, I don't know if I want to be on the web series, but they've embraced it, and it's all created by the students. Just like the video with Project Hero, the students did that. Brooke, the woman who was the teacher, she was a Master of Fine Arts student in digital production arts. She created that, and that was her thesis, the whole Project Hero, the robot and everything. So here's the next one.
Let me introduce you to this cat Malik, who's currently on the way to go grab some sweets. He had to get some Snickers, cause his sweet tooth triggered. So Kitty's candy stand is where he needed to hit up and pick up about 6 of them Snickers. He grabbed 6 Snicker bars real quick and had 15 penny candies that he wanted to get. The total was $3.15. But Malik said, dang, that don't make no sense, cause it should be more than that little expense. The 50 penny candies cost 1 cent each, but how much did the price of the Snickers reach? Take the penny candies out, that's 15 cents. You get $3, and then you divide $3 by the 6 Snicker bars, and 50 cents is a Snickers individual cost. Malik then thought that his math had failed, but turned to find a sign that said Snickers on sale.
So that's very entertaining, but it's more to it. This is a culturally relevant computing project. Let me tell you how this started. I'll date myself a little bit. When I was growing up, we watched cartoons on Saturdays. And there was this one thing called Schoolhouse Rock. So some of you know that. Okay. Conjunction, junction.
What's your function?
I'm just a bill. When was the last time that was aired?
I don't know. But you can still get the CDs.
You can get the CDs, and it's on YouTube. But think about this. The last time you watched that is probably a decade or decades ago. But you remember that. And how long were those clips? Short. Think about the impact of that. You could have a clip that's 2 minutes long and remember that for 20 years? We created this in the same theme as one of those, but the target audience were inner city kids in Chicago who said they did not like math. We gave this to them, and they're walking around humming city strolls, what we call this now. They're learning algebra through this interface. We actually, this was funded by NSF as well, and this is actually in Boys and Girls Clubs in Houston, I think New York, and it was one other place. And we're trying to get in Boys and Girls Clubs nationally now. what we're seeing is little girls who said they didn't like math. We saw little boys who said, I can't do math because my mom and grandfather couldn't do it either. They're doing it. They like it. They're engaged in this. Now, it'd be exciting for me if 20 years later some kid is singing this, like we all know, Bill on Capitol Hill. But that's where we're going. So can we take who they are? You show images of this African-American kid in an environment similar to what they would see. They're buying, we couldn't use Snickers, so we call it Snickers. And you go and purchase these things, and you have to do math and algebra. And they're doing it. So when we did this in Boys and Girls Clubs, we gave this to it's an after-school program. Kids come there, and there were instructors. We gave them a second part of the interface that allowed them to create quizzes or assessments. So in other words, they watch these clips, then they take a quiz. And the teachers were creating these quizzes, and we collected data. We actually, if you email me, I could send you. The grant just ended, so I have the final report for the whole grant. We worked with Valerie Taylor was on this at Texas A&M, Ron Eglash at RPI, and so we have a bunch of interesting findings from this. So again, we had students, the animations and things were created by students. We actually went into a school in Chicago and worked with the kids to create the lessons. So they were telling us about the lessons. And we have several of them. This is just the Snickers. We have a bike stand and some other ones as well. When they do fractions and all kinds of things. So again, we're taking our expertise and we're applying computing and our technology into an area that has societal impact and a societal need. So what we do, we address voting, we've done gun violence, we're looking at educating diverse populations. We actually had a project on affirmative action. I didn't talk about that, but I have a project there. Project on texting while driving. We actually worked with BMW on this, and we created a technology that we call voicing that allows you to communicate while driving that's less distracting than actually talking to a person in the car. So we did that, and we've done many, many other things. I mean, this is just some of the stuff we do. And what I find is that these students are more attracted to what we do now because they see the connection. Remember the helping professions. These students were a little shy of just, do I have to just go do algorithms all day and sit in the cube? And that whole mental frame of mind is a deterrent. They don't like that. When they see this, I got to kick them out of the lab. Why are you in the lab at 3 o'clock in the morning? Go home. They are very engaged in this work. They're passionate about solving these problems, and they'll work on it all day. Who we are. We did this, meaning a group of African-American, Hispanic women. We built all these technologies. Imagine that. We've had, I work with undergraduate research program, the DREW program, through CDC and CRAW, which is Computing Research Association for Women, and then Coalition to Diversify Computing. So they have a summer program where they take students that go spend a summer in a lab somewhere. And these are students from underrepresented group, and they try and match them with faculty from underrepresented groups. So every summer I have 2, 3 students come. We've had over 50 students work on our voting system, for example. Imagine they're going to go vote, and they're going to vote on a system and say, this looks very familiar. I think I did something like this. And they actually did what they're voting on. So we took this group of people. We're, underrepresented people doing this work, having societal impacts. And I always say you can change the world too. If you had asked me or asked my mother if we would be doing this, I don't think anybody anticipated this. We decided that we were going to try it. And we've been pretty successful at it, the things we've been able to do. And there's plenty of problems out there. Climate change by itself. So if you look at what we do, we take people from different disciplines, we get together and we brainstorm, we look at different perspectives, and your diversity matters. You don't learn much from hanging around people like yourself. If you can meet someone who's different and understand their perspective, it goes a long way. And that's my personal experience. Hanging out with those social scientists completely equipped me and gave me an advantage, in particular with NSF, because I wrote grants very differently than my colleagues in computer science. And that made me look different, and it gave me a different perspective. So I would say if you're looking at these issues, and again, climate change is a big one, do it differently. Don't walk in those same footprints. You have a different idea, don't be afraid to try it. Follow your passion. Be a scientist and change the world. Just because you're a scientist doesn't mean you only work with phenomenon and artifact. You can engage people. You can make people's lives better. And if you do, you too can someday meet the president. And that was fun. I always like to show that because it was a highlight of my career. And for meeting President Obama, that was exciting. That's the Oval Office. What was shocking to me is that the Oval Office, like the doorways and stuff, are small. He's like 6'4", and I'm thinking, man, they haven't changed this place since they built it. I guess people were much smaller back then, but it is, you walk in and you look at the doorway, and it's like, wait a minute, why is it so narrow, and we're not like that anymore? But they don't change it. But it was a highlight of my career, and for my students and the work we do, I think it was a testament that we are doing good things, and you can do work that people care about and not have to sacrifice your passion to be a scientist. You do not have to do that. And that's the whole point of my talk, is that you can be true to your sense of helping society, your sense of doing good, your sense of what matters to you, and still be a scientist. You can do both. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I actually have watched Lab Days.
Yeah, watch this.
Kaylin, if you could you help me field questions on this half? Do we have any questions for Dr. Gilbert?
Before I ask my question, I just wanted to applaud you for your tenacity in terms of continuing to submit those proposals to NSF. I started with a sugar grant in 2000, and mine was culturally relevant too, but I never got the big grant because that was on the edge of trying to connect cultural relevant pedagogy and math, and I got turned down so much that I actually gave up on it. But I'm glad to see that you're working with RPI. I was trying to work with RPI too. And I'm glad to see that even though I didn't get funded, maybe I put some seeds out there that cultural relevancy and math do go together, and then you and other people behind you have had that success. But I've been successful in other places with other ideas, so, and I've continued to do the culturally relevant pedagogy, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
But my question is about the voting. I like what you've done in terms of the technology, but I'm also concerned about informed citizenship. Do you also have something that is going to, like a video, explain the issues so that when a person goes to vote, they're not just voting because of the person, but they also understand what they represent?
All right, so a couple of things. First, thanks about the cultural relevancy. It's interesting now because that is somewhat, for lack of a better word, popularized. You see it now. More people are saying, well, maybe there's something there. So it's starting to catch on. It has. With respect to our voting, the voting project, we haven't done anything as far as to make people aware of candidates and their stands. I don't know. We may do that someday. I know there's some companies out there doing things like that to make it more accessible to see where a candidate stands and informing people. We haven't gotten involved in that. And one of the reasons probably is, I'll tell you a negative side effect of the work we've done, in particular in voting. My students come in, they're very excited, they're happy to do this work, and then they discover something. It was one day we created some part of Prime 3, and it was similar to the story I told you about Project Hero, where we get the let me take a step back. We get to spend a lot of time in D.C., and I get to meet people, congressmen, senators, et cetera. We engage with policymakers. And so I bring my students. And it was interesting, from my perspective, I'm thinking I'm bringing my students, this is a good experience, they're going to learn from it. And one of the things they took away, and I didn't see this coming, it was after we met with a bunch of them that they told me this. So we went to a Republican senator, showed him our work, we like it. Showed it to Democrat congressperson, we like it. Then they found out that they liked it, and neither one liked it anymore. So the political aspects, meaning when they found out that their opposition was for something, they immediately said, I'm against it. That had a humongous impact on the psyche of my students. Because they're thinking, we're doing good work. It works. This is good. It's a solution. And they both like it, but now they don't. So that may be one of the reasons we haven't gotten into the area of informing people about candidate stands, is because I think that experience may have discouraged them from getting too political, and they see that as being political, telling people about that. It's not to say we won't do it. We just haven't done it at this point. I think Marilyn.
Hey, this was wonderful. I really
Thank you.
appreciate this whole approach of if you see a problem, use your expertise to address it. That's excellent. I think it de-emphasizes so many of the demographic barriers and some of the societal things. So thank you for that. One thing I don't know if you know, you were focusing, I think, in Project Hero, which looks cool, on the shootings in K-12. And you know that there's some efforts right now looking at shootings on college campuses and whether or not guns should be allowed on campus or not. So, okay. The question was, Lab Days was really cool, and I wondered if these kids had any marketing guidance in this, or is this just from the students?
Lab Days is from the students. I actually hired a student from journalism to be my production manager. And so she produced this, and she got a job at a TV station. So she's in Savannah, Georgia somewhere now. And I will always do that. I mean, I like to give the students control. And they use, again, for their thesis and things like that, they get something out of it. I feed them ideas and topics, say, here are the projects we're working on. We can highlight this one or highlight that one, or here's an individual we should highlight. And they come up with the scripts. So that's how we've done it. And it works. I mean, I tell my colleagues all the time, at some point you have to trust your students. And I mean, it's a leap of faith for many people, but you know, I do it. I say, look, we're going to put this thing together. I'm going to give you responsibility, and you got to do it. And so far, it's worked pretty good. I mean, we have some laps every now and then, but that's how it works. So they do this, and I play a role as helping.
You seem very savvy in terms of audience engagement and those elements, and I'm really glad you're doing the education research on it now, because that's going to be really useful.
Yes, and so not only that, remember, we're trying to get curriculum. So we work with teachers, and so we got a teacher in Charlotte, we got Atlanta, now we're moving to Florida, so we're going to get some in Gainesville. We're going to have teachers creating curriculum. And we don't tell them, so let me make this clear. I don't come in and say, we want you to create curriculum this way. I'm saying, I want you to look at this web series, and could you incorporate that as curriculum for Black History Month? That's how we approach it. And the teacher said, yeah, I think I can. Okay, why don't you tell us about it? Can we help you? We never tell them what to do. We let them use because they're the expertise. That's their domain. We let them create the curriculum, and if we can get more people to do that, we'll work with them. So that's how that's how we work with everyone. We never intrude on expertise. We want you to bring what you know to the table.
I thought your presentation was great. And I have a couple of questions, or a question really, about the voting system work that's going on. Because I think it's awesome that y'all are tackling this issue. But my question is related to security when you start going into more digital forms of voting. Because I know QR codes are not always the most secure form of digital information, and I know, and with voting, security is a major issue.
Yep. I want to show you something. So I didn't put all this in I have a separate presentation that talks just about prime 3, and I'll show you a picture or something. Yeah, the security stuff, we got that locked down, actually. To date, no one has ever been able to hack prime 3. And I'll show you why when I find the slide. Now, we don't use that. So prime 3 actually, here it is. What we do is we can run prime 3 from a bootable DVD that's read-only. We talked about that, but that's not the part that's important. We create a paper ballot. The paper ballot is the ballot of record, and this is what it looks like. It can have a picture or not, but it prints only the contest and the candidate that you voted for. So it eliminates ambiguity, and then this piece of paper goes in the ballot box. And we have different strategies. So one strategy that we recommend, it goes in the ballot box. You put them all in the ballot box. Then you take them out and you tag them. Tagging them means you put them through a printer and they print a unique number on each one. Now you take those and you put them through a scanner. Imagine like a photocopier that just takes a picture of each one. And then we run optical character recognition on these, and we have an algorithm that can get us over 99% accuracy in recognizing them. And so we run it through OCR, and that's how we do it. So now, going to the security question. So if I'm going to hack this, there's a lot of issues with hacking it. One, the prime 3, to be honest with you, is a sophisticated ink pen. That's all it is. The paper is the ballot of record. Now, if you're going to ballot stuff, we put those numbers on there because now if I'm going to take ballots out and stuff, I have to take them out, replace them with the right number, and replace the images as well. This ballot is easier to count for humans. It's counted by the machine the way a human does. It reads it, scans it, tallies it like people. So this got us around that. Now the QR code, you could damage it and everything, but remember, it brings up the review screen. So, you know, people ask, can I coerce people to vote a certain way? Meaning, can I buy your vote? I say, take their money, because they can't prove you voted any kind of way, and you can get paid to go vote, do it. So the way we envision this is the QR codes make voting faster, it makes it more accurate, and it makes it fun. I want to say, if this gets implemented, I bet you there are going to be bumper stickers with QR codes, say vote Republican, there are going to be T-shirts, God forbid somebody gets a tattoo. We're going to see QR codes for voting everywhere. But again, if it doesn't work, you can still just fill out, mark your ballot there. So the QR code is not the ballot of record.
Hi, Juan. My name's Wendy Williams, and thank you very much for your presentation. I'm coming at this from the side of geosciences, and traditionally trained in a research institution on hard rock and lots of chemistry data sets. But since working with freshman and sophomore level students at public institutions, community colleges, 2 YCs, and 4 YCs, higher ed, I have personally found a passion with working with persons with disabilities and working with varied learners, whether or not they are diagnosed with the disability. And so I applaud you mentioning universal design in terms of voting. And, you know, I'm curious of maybe other venues that your students might be pursuing in terms of education, K-12 or higher ed, with adaptive technologies that might be useful across the board outside of just your Disability Resource Center. Have you had an opportunity yet, or do you see some potential going to this new institution that may have a higher number of students that are ADA students?
Yeah. We probably will. Florida's a very diverse state, so we're going to get more diversity by definition. On the adaptive technology, I actually did my dissertation research in that area. And you know, it's fascinating. I'll tell you a little story about me to answer your question. I went to Miami University in Ohio undergrad. And many people don't know this, but my major as my freshman and sophomore year was chemistry. I love chemistry. You say, well, how did you end up in computer science? I was very good at chemistry to the extent that I took advanced chemistry, and a senior one day pulled me aside and said, Juan, you're very good at chemistry. You're going to do well. You're going to get all A's. You're going to graduate, and you're going to go to graduate school and just excel. Well, go where? Graduate school. I got to go to school again? See, I'm the first in my family to go to college, and my mental model was that I'm going to college so I can get a job. I didn't know anything about graduate school. I had never heard those words. So I changed my major to computer science because my resident advisor was a computer science major who just got a job graduating. So that's how I ended up in computer science, was I was trying to avoid graduate school, and you see how that worked out. Yeah, ended up many years in graduate school. So I think and that was my perspective. Is my mother, my father had an 8th grade education. He was born and raised in Pulaski, Tennessee. Some of you may know the history of Pulaski, Tennessee. He was there when a lot of that stuff happened. And he took up a trade. And my dad fixed cars and worked in a paint and body shop. Ended up creating his own business for 30 years, extremely successful. My mother graduated from high school. She worked in the local school system. So this is going to explain a lot for you. Her job was not a teacher. She was a teacher's aide for students with disabilities. So how does that work out? Look at what I ended up doing. So for me, a lot of the work we do is centered around universal design. Our students are interested in that. Many of the students didn't realize that this was an issue. If you don't have a disability, they didn't see it as an issue. They didn't know students with disabilities had so many problems. And then when they do, they relate to them. Students from underrepresented groups, it goes back to that helping profession thing. When they discover, whoa, this whole population over here has issues way worse than mine. Can I help them? And you see that. So I suspect we'll do more. One of the things we're going to do at Florida, Florida has this initiative called UF Online, and they're creating an online learning institute. So we're going to do more in the learning space. So stuff like City Stroll and those kind of things, you're going to see more stuff like that with demographics and adaptive learning and things like that. So we'll do some more of that kind of work. But we will always have universal design at our core. Because my professional opinion is if you design at a universal perspective, everyone benefits more so. And it's the security question. This is right at that. People don't get it, but universal design makes things more secure. And the reason being is because if I have 2 machines, and this is for people with disabilities, I can target that machine and figure out how to disenfranchise a group. But if everybody's voting on the same machine, it's harder to do that. The machine can't tell a blind person from a person without arms. So it's just better design. Not only does it accommodate, it's better design, gives you better solutions. And so that's our principle, and we'll do that in everything we do.
Well, thank you very much for that. That's an endorsement for some other things that we're going to have later today that I'm going to be part of.
Where are you located now?
Well, I teach in Arkansas, and so I'm at a community college in Northwest Arkansas.
Okay.
And also affiliated with UA Little Rock. And it was because of that, and this is what I was going to suggest for your students. Going outside of my discipline,
right,
like you did with social scientists, I start hanging out with people that are in Disability Resource Center. And we've had these conversations, or I've benefited for students enrolled in my non-majors and then ultimately being majors that brought cognitive disabilities or vision impairment or blindness, and being able to learn about some of those things that as a busy tenure track faculty,
right,
oh, you have braille refreshing haptic devices, or can we use 3D printing, which is becoming more prevalent?
Yes.
Wait till the next Kinko's has that available to you. How do we incorporate that more universally? And so my best growth and enlightenment has been working with people that deal with the accommodations directly and trying to think about making it more equitable and trying to apply it more universally. So I'm really appreciative of this. What I'm probably not as appreciative about is thanks for the earworms. Not only do I have Snickers in my mind now, but I got conjunction junction.
Yeah. Can we say that?
I moved to Arkansas professionally. It started there. That's
right,
where the person that created that resides. And
yeah.
so when they did the 20th, that's when I realized. So, yeah, this is why we bring arts into STEM,
right,
right?
Yeah, and it's STEAM now.
And now it sticks. So
yeah.
hear me humming.
If is anybody here from Colorado Boulder?
Wait, here from like
work at UCU, or well, I have a colleague who just accepted a position here. His name's Sean Kane, Kane. He's moving from UMBC, and he'd been in the computer science department doing a lot of the accessibility research. So he'd be a great person to connect with. Sean Kane.
So we have time for one more question.
Taking a bit of a step back again, you said that one of the things you did early on was hang out with social scientists. And one of the themes that keeps coming up as we're talking is that this kind of cross-fertilization with the social sciences is one of the most powerful insight-producing mechanisms that people in this room are discovering. But it's not always easy to find the right person or the right group.
Right.
I'm wondering if you have any thoughts for those of us who are trying to figure out new ways of approaching issues and would like to put together a collaboration with social scientists. How do we start?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's tough. So before I answer, let me give you a little story about my experience. The City Stroll, Atomless stuff we did, that was funded by NSF. I got my Ph.D. in 2000, and to show you how this worked. When I started my job at Auburn, I had this NSF grant, and the NSF grant was, these are big grants, 5-year Information Technology Research, ITR grants. A couple of senior faculty in computer science asked me to work with them, and they made me a co-PI on this grant. And one of the researchers on that grant was Stafford Hood. Stafford Hood is at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And he does assessment research on testing and things like that, and he does it from a culturally relevant perspective. We spent 3 years just learning how to talk to each other. So it took time, because his thing of an assessment was different and meant something different to me. It took us a while. And we just found each other by accident, but that opened up my doors even more broad. So in my transition to Florida, what I did was I started looking at the different departments, political science, education, and see who's there and who may be doing something of interest to me. And so I just sent them an email and said, I'd like to meet with you and just have a conversation. So what you do is you start off with a conversation about what they do. And my personal opinion, like I like to do, is let them do most of the talking. Let them talk and find out what they do. And then you ask questions and you engage. And then you make a decision on how you could work with them. You got to think outside the box, though, because if you look at it, we're trained, I mean, it's sad to say, we typically train in a silo and a discipline, and we learn how to work very well in that discipline. And then coming outside of that discipline, there's a lot of issues. There's confidence issues. Can I really understand what they're doing over there? And then there's respect issues. Well, they're doing that kind of research. That's not really up to par of what we do. Once you get through all of that, what you'll find is that there are people out there eager to work with you. And you were right. From my experience, I would say the success that we've had, a lot of the training I had in computer science, I mean, we contribute to what we actually do. But I think the success we've had has been through the interdisciplinary connections for learning from others, because just being honest, I mean, it's about competition. I'm competing against other people who are writing NSF proposals. How do I give myself an advantage? I have to separate myself. I have to distinguish myself. I have to look different. I actually talk different because of the interactions I have with Stafford Hood and others, because I learn things differently. And those connections actually matter in the implementations and things we build. When this whole voting thing, when we would go see other universities and students who build voting systems and things, and we walk in the room and immediately we know everything that was wrong with it. And they never see it because they never work with a person with a disability. They've never talked to a political scientist. They never understand that, oh, the way you're going to do that write-in will never work, because politicians don't want you to use a look ahead, because what happens if it gives my candidate's name instead of mine? It never crosses a computer scientist's mind, something like that. They're just looking at the technology saying, oh, they got to write in a candidate's name? Oh, this would be easy. You know how on your phone you type and it gives you a look ahead? We can just do that, and it makes it faster. That'll never work in politics, because they're going to say, wait a minute, that thing might suggest my opponent's name. You know, we can't have that look ahead. You know, things like that. So It enriches your research capability if you have just a little understanding. I'm not saying you have to be an expertise in all these other areas, but if you understand where to go get the expertise, if you understand their way of operation, that benefits you. It benefits our solutions. I put up, being here talking about geosciences, I put up climate change. I mean, I don't know, there may be a bigger problem out there, but that's a pretty big one. So take a different perspective. What happens if you approach a psychologist about climate change? A computer scientist, a physicist, or an education researcher? What would they say about it? Why do you think there's climate change? What do you think's going on? The answer that they could give you may be completely wrong, but it may be wrong enough that it makes you see the solution differently. That's what you need. You need to see it differently. You have to do that. And that's why you talk to people who had different perspectives. So I would encourage you in whatever field you're in. It doesn't matter. The idea is that if you could talk to someone who is ignorant of what your discipline is, and if you can communicate to them the issue and let them tell you what they think works, hear that. I mean, it just, the whole thing about voting, when we started this, to us it was obvious that the computer should talk to you and you could talk back to it, but you can't respond by saying a name. That was obvious to us, but to many people they said, oh, you're using speech recognition. That means that's wrong. You can't do that because you can't say out loud who you're voting for. And we don't do that. We ask you to vote for someone and you say yes. So you see what I mean? So you got to get outside of your discipline, and even hearing the things that are wrong can make you see the world differently. And you think of it like this. If this is the problem space which you operate in, sometimes the solution is right out here, but you never see it because your training is in here. And if someone says something to you that's ridiculous, it brings you way out here, but now I'm outside in my space and I may actually be closer to the solution just because I got outside of the common way of thinking, conventional thought. The research shows us. The research suggests. And that's what we do, right? We talk about, well, so-and-so's research. Well, we knew this or we knew that. It's what we don't know, and that's what you want to find. And sometimes the way to find that is to get outside of your discipline. The days of, sitting in your garage and one person coming up with a solution. I mean, we have NSFers here. How many single PI proposals are there nowadays? A lot less. The problems require more, it's bigger now. So embrace it. Go outside, utilize it. That's my advice. Thank you.